Well, it's well overdue for another Star Wars review. You like that? Dr. Seuss, Matt Wilkins reference sort of thing with his board game reviews. Okay, I'm getting too technical. Let's talk about some new canon. Now, last time I reviewed new canon on here, it almost became a can rant. So let's talk about Lords of the Sith by Paul S. Kemp. This is a Star Wars book, which is a Valkyrie plot to kill Darth Vader and the Emperor. If that sounds familiar, it's been done to death. This is like the fourth or fifth version of like this type of story I've read, but this is new canon, so I mean that none of that stuff existed. So we got this Valkyrie plot to kill Vader and the Emperor. Let me talk about the story. So this guy named Chem Syndola or whatever, he is a Twi'lek from the Free Ryloth movement, which are freedom fighters, a precursor to, I guess, the rebellion in the new canon, and they're trying to free Ryloth, the planet where Twi'leks come from. They intercept a communications message that Vader and the Emperor themselves are personally going to go to Ryloth. So he and his associate Isval, who is the love interest, set up this plot to destroy the Star Destroyer, the Perilous, which in the new canon there has never been a Star Destroyer destroyed. So they are going to sabotage and destroy the Star Destroyer, killing Vader and the Emperor. Meanwhile, they have an Imperial officer blackmailed and in their pocket named Belker, who is technically in charge of everything, although the Moff is in charge, but she doesn't. Mothmore doesn't do anything except do drugs and hang out with Hutts and have Twi'lek slaves on the moon next to Ryloth. So, hilarity ensues, and it's a hunt to kill Vader and the Emperor. What did I think of this book? Well, this book was a mixed bag, because there were some really good things in here, and there were some really terrible things in here. I will get into the good real quick, because there are some really good points. Most of the characters, with the exception of the Moff and Isval, are very interesting. And the main characters, Belker goes from being an arrogant asshole to becoming a crazy person. Spoilers. Vader and the Emperor are very enjoyable. In fact, they're the highlight of this book. The Emperor's testing Vader throughout of this, and Vader's just really evil. They made an idea that's been done to death actually really, it was a bit refreshing, to believe it or not. The way they do it is very, so insane that it was actually really enjoyable. Then we get into the bad. This book has some fucking terrible things in here, pardon my French. Just absolutely awful things are in this book. We end up... So, in the middle of the book, they hack a bunch of battle droid spaceships, like Tri-Fighters and Buzz droids, and like the Free Ryloth movement. I don't even know how they got it, but apparently they did from back in the Clone Wars. They hacked them and they just siege the Perilous after they set up a minefield which the Star Destroyer goes through. In this, Isval has a whole team where she runs in, and they demo the hyperdrive, which for some reason really makes everything go kaboom. I didn't know hyperdrives did that. It kind of doesn't make sense because in the Phantom Menace, the hyperdrive gets really badly damaged, and it didn't make the whole Nubian starfighter go kaboom, because then we wouldn't have episode 1. So that would make a whole lot of sense. But it gets really weird. So Vader decides to go out with the troops in this, and he has a TIE Interceptor, but everyone else has V-Wings. So, for those of you who don't know, V-Wings are the ships they're flying at the very end of Revenge of the Sith that kind of resemble TIE fighters, but don't. They kind of look like a mix between an A-Wing from Return of the Jedi and a TIE fighter. But Darth Vader has a TIE Interceptor? I mean, I don't know what Paul S. Kemp was trying to convey here, but it could have meant his TIE Advanced. I guess they're calling it a TIE Interceptor now. But that doesn't make sense either, because TIE fighters don't exist yet, or they're not in mass circulation. Which, why would Vader have his TIE Advanced if TIE fighters don't even exist? Or, better yet, why would he have a TIE Interceptor, which they didn't have in the original Star Wars? Confused yet? Well, I guess if you're a casual, it doesn't matter. Plus, the names of ships were really weird, like an Imperial escort boat. What is that? Is that the troop transport thing that's in the special edition of A New Hope? What is that? Is that an Imperial Shuttle? No, they have those, so it can't be the other way. It can't be an Imperial Shuttle, because they actually have Imperial Shuttles. So a lot of that just didn't make any sense at all. But we'll get into the moment that really, really fried me. Happens in the middle of this book, and Vader and the Emperor are escaping on an Imperial shuttle. Meanwhile, Isval and her team steal an Imperial escort boat, which I don't have any fucking clue what that is, except for maneuver slow, so it makes me think it's a troop dropship of some kind. I don't know. For all I know, it could be one of the LAATs, or anyone who knows what that is. So they're flying around, and essentially Vader force chokes Isval and her co-pilot while flying, and then they ram each other, and both ships are barely damaged, except for they spin out of control, and Vader goes into the atmosphere, which gets to one of the worst things I have ever read in a book, period. So Vader, after he rams Isval's ship, he flies around in a circle doing the spinny thing like he did when Han Solo shot him in the Millennium Falcon from the original Star Wars. So he's doing that, and suddenly he's like, I remember doing this I remember being in an escape pod with this happening in the Clone Wars. And I'm like, oh god. So I remembered that Chem was a character in the Clone Wars. I don't even remember anything about the episode, but he was a character in the Clone Wars, as I recall. And so they start referencing this episode, and he's like, I had someone with me, Ahsoka, and I'm just like, it's so horribly written that it just makes me want to vomit. And then it goes into even more, where he's like, I remembered other Jedi like Plo Koon, Keonda Moody, and then they hit the atmosphere, and then fires around them because they're going in too fast, and he's like, I remember Mustafar, Obi-Wan, Padme, and I'm just like, you can obviously tell that Paul S. Kemp is not good at writing stuff like that, because it was atrocious to read. I think editorial made them put that in there, and it was just awful, and it was just, the middle of the book just gets, it's like a space battle for half the book, which is just way too long, where they just siege the Perilous. And then finally, when they finally crash land on the planet, it gets good again, and the whole hunting them thing, it's like reading a Predator novel or something. It's actually really entertaining. But with that being said, I should get into my two least favorite characters of this. Isval and Mothmore. So I'll get into Isval first. So there's an attempt to give Isval a character because I guess she was a sex slave or something. That's implied, which that's awful. That's really terrible. And she was one as a child, which makes it like even worse. But like, she's some sort of Batman anti-hero woman. She goes around with this the red light district on Ryloth and goes and like beats the crap out of Imperial officers and kills them, usually freeing these young Twi'lek girls from sex slavery, which sounds awesome. I make it sound a lot better than it actually is, but it's just so drawn out. It's so stereotypical. Like, it's just been there, done that. It's like it's like you took one of Frank Miller's characters from Sin City and you made them flatter than they are. I mean, some of those characters is just bad. It was like a Frank Miller character, so to speak, but flatter. And I like Frank Miller, but sometimes some of his characters just fall flat. And then we'll get to Mothmore, who I just couldn't stand through this whole book. So Mothmore really doesn't have any. There shouldn't have even been in the book, and she was the character that was marketed to us, the first lesbian character in Star Wars. Even though there have been plenty of homosexual characters in the EU in recent years, but this was the first new canon one, so we went with that. She is a junkie and doesn't do her job and is fat and lazy and just really not a likable character at all. And that's fine for a Moth to be not likable. But she's unlikable for all the wrong reasons because she doesn't have a character. Her wife died. That sucks. But she just doesn't do anything. And it's just like, here we go with another one-dimensional, stereotypical character. The only thing she's got going for her is that she's a lesbian, which is just not something. You should have more than that. That's just not a good character. There's another guy, Gol, who is the guide character for Cham and Isval. He shows up in like the last 6 chapters of the book, and all he does is track things. That's it. Nothing going on there. Because I don't know, someone else they could have introduced earlier. They forgot, like, oh, we need to figure out how to track Palpatine and Vader on foot. Oh, let's write in a new character near the end of the book. I mean, that's stupid. But other than that, the book wasn't awful. Is it the best Sith novel? No. Not in the long run. It's better than some. But, I mean, this book, it ranks, to me, in my Star Wars books, right in the middle. It was very entertaining on a basic level, but I didn't get anything out of it. I think what we're supposed to get out of this for the new canon is that Cham Syndulla is somehow involved in creating the rebellion in Star Wars Rebels. If he hasn't shown up on there yet, he probably will. I don't think they'll get a sequel to this. But with Aftermath 2 Electric Boogaloo coming out, anything is possible in the new Disney canon. And Vader gets over his personal demons. Been there, done that several times. I think that's all you get out of it, except for some basic entertainment. Like, there's a really cool scene in there where Palpatine, Vader, and these two Royal Guard are fighting these giant bugs That was really, really a cool fight. Palpatine really does some really cool power stuff, and I love having when Palpatine unleashes his shit and does his Force lightning and stuff. But other than that, it wasn't great, wasn't terrible. I don't want to say it's middle of the road, because that'd be a disservice to this book. It's better than middle of the road, but it's not fantastic. It's very entertaining. If you want just an action-packed book on Star Wars, check this out. Very little references to the Clone Wars. There's 2, and they're both awful. But the rest of the book is fine. If you're like a casual, if you're a big EU fan, I would not recommend this book. It's going to bug the shit out of you. Especially when it's like talking about the technology that's really contradicts movie stuff, really. But most casuals wouldn't notice that, and I don't mean to be derogatory about fans that aren't big into the EU and calling you casuals. That's just the name for you. Just don't... It's not meant in any sort of malice or anything. It's just you wouldn't care about that sort of thing. So, I give this 3.5 out of 5 stars. Would I read it again? I don't know, maybe. But I'm glad I did read it this one time. And apparently this is the pinnacle Star Wars book in the new canon. This is the shit, as they say. Which makes me really wonder about the writing of most of these books. Would I read a new canon book again? Well, join me next Star Wars review when I review Aftermath. And no, I'm not reading it. I'm going to be listening to the audio book. Because, my God, reading that thing was fucking horrible. So you're going to get a lovely angry review. Maybe you'll get a Canon Rants crossover. I think that's what you people want. That'll be the next Star Wars review. I'll probably be reviewing other stuff. But we'll see. Anyway, have a nice day.